All done? Go.
Hi, good evening. My name is Marjorie Gans, and I am a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. I'm delighted that you could join us this evening for the November reading in our virtual series, Readings from the Room, which began in March. For anyone new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, both established and emerging, who need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day. It provides desks and it provides silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. So please contact us if you're curious and have any questions. Some of our readers come from the room and some come from elsewhere, as you'll hear. We launched this new reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic and share the wonderful writing by writers either who have called the Writers' Room home and some from other parts, which Crowdcast has allowed us to do. Tonight we have Dolores Johnson, who's recently published a wonderful memoir about her family, and Sarah Audsley, a writer of poetry. Dolores and Sarah will read from their work, and then we'll open to a larger discussion with some time for questions and answers at the end. As we go along, feel free to use that comments section at the bottom of the screen, and you can type in your questions there. I also say this series is made possible by grants from Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council. We also rely on friends. If you enjoy this program, please consider making a contribution by using the donate button at the bottom of your screen. We'll also be recording this reading, and a replay will be available later on our website. We begin the readings tonight with Dolores Johnson. Dolores Johnson's debut book, Say I'm Dead, a family memoir of race, secrets, and love, was published in June 2020 by Chicago Review Press. It won the Outstanding Literary Award from the National Association of Black Journalists, a starred review from the American Library Association's book list, was longlisted for the Massachusetts Book Award, and was named to a national Black Lives Matter reading list. Say I'm Dead expands on her essays about mixed race, racism, and identity, published in Narratively, Buffalo News, Boston Globe, Writers of Color Anthology, Hippocampus, Panegyris, and elsewhere. She studied creative nonfiction and memoir writing at Grub Street in Boston and has been awarded residencies at the Blue Mountain Center, Gerasi Artist Foundation, Ragdale Foundation, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Tin House Writers Conference, Voice of Our Nation, VONA, and the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. Ms. Johnson lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. To learn more about her work, you can go to her website, www.edoloresjohnson.com. Dolores, please.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thanks to the Writers' Room for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to talk to this audience, and I'm going to read a bit from a scene in Say I'm Dead, where my parents, my Black father and my white mother, tell my brothers and I for the very first time, while we are in our 30s, how they did the unthinkable in 1943. I apologize if my lighting is not consistent. I've been working on it, but not solved my issue. New in town and recently divorced, Charles headed out to Madam C.J. Walker's ballroom in 1942, the place for Indianapolis Negroes to mingle. On a mission to find a nice colored girl to start over with, to marry, he adjusted his tie before following the music upstairs. There he found a tuxedoed band perched on a roulette wheel bandstand, shimmying out the foxtrot couples danced to. He took in the scene from the bar, his eyes flitting from one attractive girl in a fancy dress to another, as he sipped a too expensive shot of bourbon. Another fellow eyed his broad shoulders and shined but worn shoes before coming over. See something you like? Yes, plenty, Charles said. Looky here, Jack, the man said. Meeting a girl at Walker's depends on what you have in your pocket and who your daddy is, see? And if she ain't happy with both, all you're going to get is one dance, if you're lucky. Charles watched smooth-talking men in stylish suits lead those women onto the dance floor, realizing he couldn't make any time there. But since there was no law against watching the well-to-do spectacle, he stayed a while for the jazz before taking a lonely stroll back to his boarding house. Where else was there for a colored man to find a suitable Negro girl, one who was nothing like the wife down in Georgia he had to marry at 17, when she said the baby was his, and later that it wasn't. The girl he wanted wasn't in the churches he tried, just old ladies, married women, and not so attractive singles. And the mother of the one he had approached snatched her away when she heard he was divorced. The girl he was looking for wasn't out Indiana Avenue at the Sunset Terrace either, where the brown sugar went to dance. They were good looking, all right, sporting outfits that clung to their charms with jaunty hats tipped over done-up hair. The ones he talked to sure enough looked like sugar, but their salty invitations tasted too much like his past. On his walk back home, the ladylike girl in the mailroom at work ran through his mind, like always. The white girl, with guts enough to talk to him like a straight-up man. The one whose soft skin he imagined touching, even though the Klan would string up his damn fool self for looking at her, the way they did those other boys. But damn, if she wasn't the sweetest woman he had ever met. The day came when Charles snuck down to the mailroom and whispered what he'd practiced in his mirror. I hope I'm not out of line, but I want you to know I like you very much. She stared at him, weighed his words intently. I've thought of you too, she said. The Negro cabbie asked Ella twice if she was sure of the address, if she wanted the colored side of town. She assured him she did, and when the cab pulled up at his place, Charles was waiting on the sidewalk. As he helped her out, the cabbie turned all the way around in his seat to glare at Charles. Man, why you want to mix me up in something like this, he said. Just take the dollar. You haven't seen a thing, understand? Charles told him. She went into his room at the boarding house and sat in the nicked easy chair as Charles fixed the Coke she asked for and added a splash of whiskey before pouring a straight one for himself. She raised her glass and made the toast that the boys at her acting class had taught her. Here's to it and to it again. If you don't do it when you get to it, you'll never get to it to do it again. He liked the life in her eyes and the spirit in her soul. Without it, he realized, she wouldn't have come over here. Charles turned on the radio to a Moody Blues tune, then a colored announcer came on. Hey, all you cats out there, it's Saturday night. Get your best girl and cut a rug. This is where we party all night long. He pulled her up to dance, though she protested that she wasn't much good. Ella Fitzgerald was on, and while they tried, neither could follow what the other was doing. She knew the foxtrot with its set patterns, and he knew the country mule. They laughed through false turns and stepping on each other's toes, but when the slow tune came on, they did better. Charles folded her into her chest, and she followed his simple steps. In no time, they were cooking together at his place a couple of nights a week. But as they grew into love, Charles began to worry. He didn't think she understood the trouble she could get in for being with him. Did this white girl even know she could be attacked in the street for it? Did she have any idea of what she could face for breaking the unwritten Jim Crow codes? Some of the Indianapolis and Marion County elected officials were open members of the Klan. They posed as good guys, doing community service like giving away wheelchairs and food. to white people. But did Ella understand that the Grand Wizard, a man named Stevenson, used to run the nationwide Ku Klux from Indianapolis? That they hated Negroes so much they terrorized them and murdered them? She didn't. 2 Negro men got lynched in Marion, Indiana, a few years before he and Ella took up. After a robbery and a murder, a white woman claimed rape. The suspected men were locked up briefly until a white mob broke into the jail with sledgehammers and strung them up. Charles saw a picture postcard of the lynching taped up next to the price list in the black barber shop. On it, a big crowd of men and women milled around the brown bodies hanging from trees, their white faces satisfied. The victims' heads bent over their nooses where their necks had broken, their limp legs dangling free. Their bodies were left on display as whites congratulated themselves for delivering vigilante justice. That was the proof, the man in the next barber's chair told him, that the Klan was the law. Don't take no chances in these parts, he said. Nobody has been called to account. As happened at many lynchings, a studio photographer shot this ghastly picture, then sold thousands of copies, like circus souvenirs, to white people who wanted a keepsake. Charles sat Ella down to explain how it was. Somebody could get the law on him because of their relationship, trump up the charges, throw him in jail, beat him half to death, or lynch him for touching a white woman. And nobody would do a thing about it. He was getting pretty scared, and she should be too. Ella had to understand that for her part, the place where they both worked would fire her if they found out. It would be a scandal, and all white people would turn their backs on her. My brother David, who was listening to this account with me, wiped his brow with the handkerchief he always carried and asked my mother incredulously, "You mean this was the first you had ever heard of any of this, Mama? How could you not know?" My life had only been in the white community up to that point, Mama said. I was completely sheltered from that kind of thing. Negro business wasn't my business or anybody's that I knew. My family didn't follow politics or race, and even if they had, a lynching wasn't anything to talk to a young girl about. When your father explained all of this to me, I had only the vaguest idea. Charles wanted Ella to think these risks through before they saw each other again. She had to decide if the risks were worth it. Could she live with her family never knowing about them, just staying alert all the time so that they didn't make the one mistake that would ruin their lives? He took Ella by the shoulders and finally told her he loved her so much he was willing to take those risks. Charles' forehead sweat and his voice dropped deep with desperation when he said he had to know she loved him the same way. He pulled her close and stroked her thick curls. "Take some time and think hard about this before you answer me," he said. "I mean it. And if you don't come back, I'll understand. Thank you."
Thank you, Dolores. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So we turn from that to another wonderful author, a poet, Sarah Audsley. And Sarah is a poet and an adoptee who was born in South Korea and raised in rural Vermont. She writes beautifully about this experience in some of her poetry. Sarah received support for her work from the Rona Jaffe Foundation and residencies at the Vermont Studio Center and the Banff Center's Writing Studio. Her work has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, Best New Poets 2020, and appears in the New England Review, the Portland Review, Four-Way Review, Massachusetts Review, Tupelo Quarterly, and Pleiades. She is a graduate of the MFA program for writers at the Warren Wilson College, and she lives and works in Johnson, Vermont. Information on Sarah's work is available on her website at www.sarahaudsley.com. Sarah.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you, Dolores, for reading that beautiful piece. I can't wait to read the rest of your book. And thank you, everyone else, for being here, and thanks to the Writers' Room for having me. I work for Vermont Studio Center, so I'm very well aware of the necessity of having quiet space and time and your own space to do that as a writer. So I've never been to the Writers' Room of Boston, but I look forward to visiting someday soon. And thank you so much for having me. Tonight, I'm going to read a few poems from a sequence that I've been working on. It's actually kind of new, and I've never read any of these poems in public before. It's a concept I've been thinking about of the X variable, like the letter X, and thinking of myself as being someone landlocked as an adoptee. I grew up in rural Vermont, and I'm thinking about my fellow adoptees who grew up in rural spaces as the only people of color in their communities. And it's also some of these poems are the first attempt at writing in the first person plural, so in the we, in the collective voice, which I've always shied away from because I feel like it's a difficult undertaking. So I'm going to read some poems from the sequence called Landlock X. Landlock X. 1. Definition. What language grows out of a body locked in landscape? Adjective. Unique of a kind, not touching any body of water, species mutating, without shoreline, not touching a body of catastrophe, no typhoons, hurricanes, no wind thrown across a glassy surface, no place for wading birds. Only of one kind tramples the blue goldenrod. Verb. X says we will eat the land when we become golden. Azure colors, our forms, yet unlock what withers the dry land. Noun. I, invitations, sent to water. I tore venom from the bridegroom. I make my bed among the purpled asters. Untranslatable. I was the X. I know where you sleep in the forest. Unfolded map. Marked X. Ghost drifting. We release into our own wilderness. 2. I feel the most Asian while watching martial arts on the big screen or on channeling Asian futurism. We loved them so, we ate them, the orange birds, ooze golden liquid coats our throats, their song silenced. They sing unskilled and full of longing. Each predator chokes up on the body, crunch the middle, rip off the head, and leave wings. In the future, we are more hungry than hunger's long finger shredding to pulp chartreuse feathers. We eat the orange birds. We love them so. We make coats of their throats and choke up wings. All things beaked in fully, and there was no second without knowing, belonging to a pecking order, to a people, to a race, to monolids, to black hair, and we keep eating the orange gold birds until their flight becomes our own natural selection. 3. Repetition for X. There is the field I imagine, and then the field I step into. There is the field I imagine, and then the field I step into. There is the field I imagine, and then the field I step into. The field I step into, and then there is the field of X. The field of X, and then I imagine the field I step into. Then into the field I imagine is the X and the field I step. Four. There are two more, so four. You have two more poems. In the golden hour, in the landlocked X. When we realized we were golden, we knew we could eat the land, the fields we roamed, what love bites, claims, the bone we grind with our teeth. We collect dew and weave its loose strands. Loss circles the lip of the sun. We drink mineral particles. We slept when the night arrived cool and caved, clenched to anticipate what was coming. When we were golden, we crowned ourselves of goldenrod. Each moon was a flipped rabbit in orbit. Barcodes on our necks dissolved, no imprints left. We find the lost children in the trees, led by pollen dust. Golden we were when we ate what we ate glistened. As portions of ourselves, a repetition of longing, bees died over winter in their stiff boxes, not to spook the deer, but to wander the fields. All night we wrangle the fireflies, and those who make of their own light invent the proportions they desire. When golden was an hour, we ate our fill. Our mirrors sent the self back in image, and we created ourselves in the image of golden fire. So what pierces cannot reach the inner road to harvest. In the forests, we know there is no belonging. There is belonging, no chance to be left out, othered, abandoned, alone. But fang, talon, bite, eviscerate, shred, X, only the collapse of climate and duration of wanting will wound those who know they were born golden to eat the land and to be held by trees as helmed thrones of shattered light. Thanks so much for listening. This is my last poem I'll be reading tonight, and then I look forward to the conversation with Dolores afterwards. I hope you can hang out for that, and feel free to drop questions into the chat, into the Ask a Question box below for either of us. This is the last poem, and it's called Symbology.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I have one more. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. That was
Okay,
my
great.
mistake. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, so this is the last one this evening. Thank you for listening. Symbology. Dead hummingbird on the mulch pile the day of my mother's surgery. Iridescent green paralysis. Last flight into the shut window. Chunk of labradorite cabochon encased in a flaming silver heart. For protection, for sale on a 22-inch chain. The BB gun shot straight through the locked car window. Glass in cars shatters in chunks to prevent decapitation in an accident. I made my bed among the purpled asters as untranslatable X. Potted plants thrive under new angles of light. Every color means something to someone. Each rainbow arcs away from the earth and then back down to golden. My mother as no symbol of heaven or earth. She has meaning through her death. I move right of center, I as blasphemous daughter. Mary was only one woman, and now look at the lack of choice in Texas. And by now I should be MOTHER of a teenager, the coat hanger inked on my left ankle, another symbol of blood and water, two liquids returning to the same source. The moon phases printed on curtains flutter in the windows on Railroad Street. A car fire explodes on Clark Ave. Nowhere is safety. Dress to impress means conform to standards of the beholder. Everywhere I look is beauty incarnate, and I as X cannot touch. What vase makes use of its own function without assistance? A vessel becomes symbol, a snapped neck for self-determination. Bird by bird died, and tiny mites will return the meek. the leather-bound book locked secrets, and I encase avian ambition. The collective noun for hummingbird is charm. Look there, look here, look, 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 and look again. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful, Sarah. You cover such a range. We have time for some questions, and there are two questions from the audience, so I will start with those. And the first for Dolores. It says, Ms. Johnson, I love how you evoke the late 1940s and early 1950s. Can you say more about how you thought about doing this and how you made it feel so current, please?
I wanted to evoke the environment that my parents met in as vividly as possible. And the way I did that was, first of all, talking to them about what it was like, and then doing a lot of research. It's really research, I think, that comes through where I'm able to talk about the Klan. The photograph that of the lynching came from the Indiana Historical Society, where I bought the rights to use it. And, I researched the music of the era. Well, Ella Fitzgerald was playing on the radio. So actually, my book has been called a reported memoir because of the level of research behind the portraits that I write.
Yeah, I was interested
Wow.
in Dolores in your work about the intersection of imagination and research and fiction, because I could hear that there was a lot of imagining happened, but based in fact. What was that process like for you?
Well, I think there are many techniques in memoir where you are filling in what you've researched, and you may not have. No one had sat down with me and said, "This is exactly how the ballroom looks." So I went to Indianapolis to research a number of things, but I went to the Madam C.J. Walker Ballroom and was given a tour where I saw exactly how the bandstand tilted and that it was a roulette wheel and all of that. And so it was easy for me to take my father's words where he said that my mom was the sweetest woman he had ever seen, and paint that on top of what I found at the Madam C.J. Walker Ballroom. So, you can say in some passages I do in the book, I imagined that they did X, or she had on a dress like this, which I knew how my mother's wardrobe looked and what suited her. She was more buttoned up than many women, and so I could look at a dress in a flash and say she'd wear that or she wouldn't wear that. So that blend it's not fiction, but it is imagination that is based in fact.
Good, thank you. Sarah, it's a question for you. If I can bring it up here, there it is. Oops. The question is, Miss Audsley, can you talk about accessibility in terms of your poetry, please? How important to you is accessibility, and is that something that you think about?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's interesting to that the term of accessibility often gets used to discuss poetry, because I think that we have, as a culture, overall American culture, we have an aversion to poetry because it seems like it's difficult or difficult to access. And then sometimes if we hear something that's denoted as accessible, therefore it's too easy. But I think that so it was a risk for me to read what I read tonight, because I do know that for the listener, it might be hard to gloss or to parse what I was reading, because they're not narratively driven poems. They're really thinking about language, and also there's like a cascade of images over and over again that are kind of like hitting you in the face or in the ear. And then the last poem that I read, Symbology, is very much like using associative. It's like taking a lot of leaps and with associations. And I do consider the reader when I'm revising my work. And this is definitely like new work that I wrote in September, so it was kind of a little bit risky for me to read to an audience, but I wanted to give it a try. I do normally read more narratively driven poems, poems that feel like they have like a beginning, middle, and end. And I feel like that is easier to listen to parse. But so I do care about the reader engaging with the poem and coming up with some type of like glossing meaning or understanding, or having an experience by accessing the poem. And if you want to clarify, if you felt like maybe you're saying that it felt inaccessible to you, which I totally will understand. Yeah, I think that I want to trust my reader and my listener too, to be able to do the work, to be able to take the time to get over the feeling of something that's inaccessible as well. So I think that the poems I read tonight might be easier to parse if someone was reading them on the page. But I also think that just experiencing and listening to the words and the cascade of images is a different experience. So I guess what I offered tonight was an invitation to listen. Yeah.
So it's 7:30. We'll pass 7:30. There is one more question, and do you mind if I sort of pull that question up, and then we'll wrap up the evening? Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah,
It's a question for Dolores, and I actually think it's kind of fascinating. Dolores, what was it like to interview your parents, and were they eager to talk?
They were not eager to talk. You see, I lived my life as a Black person. Born in 1948, my birth certificate was stamped Negro with no regard to my mother's biology. And as the passage I read, as I said, we had no idea, my brothers and I, that our parents were actually fugitives from the FBI. My mother had staged her own disappearance and run away in order to marry my father legally in New York. And so I did my family genealogy on my father's side, the Black family, and only after laying out all those generations did I realize I only had one white relative, my mother. And so I was living in another state, married, and I went home, had all my family together. And when I said half of our family was missing, everybody looked at me like I was crazy. So no, they didn't want to talk about it because my mother had been declared dead by the police, and her family had lived with that for 36 years. So interviewing them was at first very traumatic for everybody. But after I got a certain amount of information out of them, they finally, after months, agreed to let me go and search for my mother's family. I had never even known that we had anybody in Indiana. And once I made contact with them, my parents were eager to to tell more because I came back with not open arms. The meeting was such a shock that I don't think my aunt or I knew what to do when we were standing face to face. But she gave me her contact details, and when I was writing the book, I went back and I interviewed everyone who's in my book, everyone. And I had some journalist friends who helped me structure my interview so I got the right information from each party. And I learned to do interviewing. Again, this is based, in reportage, the way the book is based. And when I made that first genealogy chart and showed it to my family, my father started immediately marking it up. This isn't right. You didn't put this person. This person's marriage ended in divorce. Blah blah blah. And so there had already been some rhythm around searching our family history, but the shock of their secret being uncovered, as it was, made the interviewing a very long process in tranches as they loosened up.
Oh, thank you. I would like to read more of each of your work, I have to say. And Sarah, I really do want to sit down and read it on the page, because there's so much in there.
There's a lot
Yeah.
there, and I was listening for the connections, but I really would love to see it on the page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I can send you the selection from the evening if you want. If you really
Oh, wonderful. That would be great. Okay, so it is time to wrap up for tonight. I want to thank you, Dolores, Sarah. These were really wonderful, wonderful readings. And I want to thank the Writers' Room Board President, Mark Eichen, who is back there behind the scenes as both producer and technology maven. Without him, we would not be here. And our reading series, this draws it to a close for 2021. We thought we'd take December off and let people have their holiday. And we will pick up in January 2022. We already have a good roster of readers of all kinds of things: memoir, fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and not just from the area, there are local writers, but also really from around the country, because we'll keep doing that as long as we don't feel ready meeting in person. So we hope that you will join us and spread the word. And yes, Dolores, Sarah, everybody come by, take a look at the room. It is really, truly a wonderful place. So thank you all, and have a good holiday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.